I don't know how well this is going to come out, but every time I go past this sign, I just think maybe I should record that. I'm going slow enough that I can do this. But nobody looks like that and eats that fucking sandwich. This woman's nearly having an orgasm. She's got some of the clearest skin I've ever seen. And she's eating, doesn't even have a bite out of it, but eating this greasy ass, high fat, high cholesterol sandwich. Looking that good? No, no. I protest. So last week I had the ambition to go out on the trail and do a little field test and do some cooking. And one of the things I wanted to do was kind of cobble together a bread recipe and see if I can make bread on the trail, because I mean, I like bread. You don't get this fat without liking bread and pasta and all that other good stuff. Anyway, yesterday I got a little consumed with bike riding, so I didn't get to complete this recipe. I mixed it up last week again. I was going to explain how I did it, but now at this point in time I forgot. All I know is I centered it around 1 cup of flour. So 1 cup of flour, if I extrapolate that on most of my recipes, I'd probably put a tablespoon of sugar in here. I'd probably put half a tablespoon of salt. I probably put maybe half a teaspoon of yeast, maybe a 1/4 teaspoon of yeast. I've already forgot. And I decided to do something I typically don't do and put additional leavening agents in it, like baking soda and baking powder. I want to say a half a teaspoon each. So yeah, disregard the recipe, stick with whatever bread recipe you use, and just understand that your hydration level is what's going to matter the most. So I put enough water in this yesterday at noon. I haven't refrigerated or anything, don't really have to. It's going to end up more like a sourdough, I guess. But I put enough water in here to almost make it like a biscuit mix. So it's not wet, but it's not super wet, but it's not dry at all. Anyhow, I haven't kneaded it until this point now where you see me doing this. I fill some lumps, which to me means that there's some still dry flour and mix in there. Oh, I also use powdered butter in this. That's more for flavor than anything. When you're out there on the trail, if you decide to pack a little extra cooking agents like oil, for instance, I'm going to use peanut oil. You can use that to grease your pots and pans. If you're using titanium, they're naturally non-stick. What I should say is they're naturally stick resistant. Sometimes you'll get stuff to stick to them. But I'm going to use parchment paper in the bottom of these, just in case it cooks up a little hard on the bottom where all the heat's coming from, to avoid any kind of scorching and or carbonization and adhering to the pans. I can feel just with that little bit of kneading, the lumps have disappeared. I don't think I'm going to saturate this bread any more. Instead, what I'm going to do is almost like a steam-based cooking. And I'm going to use 2 different pots, technically 4. But I'm going to use my 1600 milliliter pot, which was the first one I ever bought. I bought it because basically you can't do the double boiler with this one very easily or very well or evenly. All your stuff runs to the side, but it goes on pretty good. And if you put a little additional weight on, like if you got stones, you can get almost not quite a good pressure seal, but almost enough of a pressure seal to help quickly cook your foodstuffs inside. Yeah, this 1600 milliliter pot was the first one I bought. And then I bought these 2 as their own nesting kit. And I like them because your skillet you can use as a double boiler. And so you could be boiling your rice in here and, I don't know, poaching eggs or whatever. But yeah. Anyhow, I'm going to use these two in combination, and I'm going to make basically a steam oven, put a little weight on top of this, and that way I can cook the bread and get more hydration into it with the steam. Little factoid, when water expands in the steam, it expands to about 1,600 to 1,700 times its volume, and that increases, I wouldn't say exponentially, but that increases on a certain ratio that people who are way smarter than me figured out years ago with temperature. Getting back to it, I said I was going to use parchment paper as a liner. This stuff is light, it's versatile, it folds up really nice. If you do plan on doing any kind of baking, I would recommend it highly, because baking on a trail is something that is relatively tricky. So with parchment paper only lining the bottom, obviously you're going to get some adherence to the side. The thing about bread, especially if it's in a drier mix, is it tends not to adhere to the sides if it's a good recipe, especially if you flour the outside. So again, mine is going to be more like a drier biscuit dough instead of more like a split dough, which is wetter. Okay, and I'm going to grease this one, and I am not going to grease the nesting one. Again, I'm using peanut oil. It's my preferred oil. High smoke point, not as harsh, or not, I wouldn't use the word harsh, not as pronounced as a flavor as, say, olive oil or walnut oil, which also has a high smoke point, somewhere around 410 degrees, which is amazing for a cooking oil. Water boiling at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. By the way, I'm going to be doing most of my measurements in Fahrenheit, leaving you metric people out a little bit. 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit is where your water is going to boil. So the inside of this will never be getting, as long as there's water in the bottom, will never be getting to a point past boiling. So the pressure is what's going to help to increase the thoroughness of cooking. Now for the Keith titanium, I'm going to want the water just below where this pot would be. Just barely touching, so that the meniscus doesn't come through these three holes, causing any unnecessary saturation in the bread. Almost. I'd say that's just touching. Oh, now it's coming through a little bit. That's fine. See, perfecto. All right. So we have that ready to accept the dough. This one I'm going to be a little bit more liberal with the water. Again, I'm not measuring the water necessarily. I'm just adding what I think would be enough. So again, I've taken the handles off this. I don't know if you caught that in any of the previous portions of the video. It's floating in there, but it's not floating so high that it is above the rim. Good movie from the 90s, by the way. And I'll devise something to put on here for added weight. That way I will increase the pressure and keep it from popping and releasing that steam, and thus evacuating the necessary heat for cooking. Smells very yeasty. It's got that alcohol note. Again, I put water in this yesterday around noon. It was just hot enough at a temperature to activate the yeast. So generally that'll be around 130 degrees. Quick way to tell your temperature on water in the field if you don't have a thermometer is if you put your finger into it and it's comfortable yet warm, it's over your body temperature. If you put your finger in it and it's just verging on pain, but it's not quite painful, that's 120 degrees, because that's where pain starts to set in. If you put your finger in it and you pull it out slowly, like that's 130 degrees. If you put it in, you pull it out quick, that's over 140. And even at that temperature where your proprioceptors will sense the pain, you will not have a third or second degree burn that would cripple you in the field. I'm gonna section off about half the bread in the bag and just squeeze it down there. Now I'm trying to avoid contact with my hands. When I'm in my kitchen, I don't worry about it so much, but when I'm in the field, even when I try to maintain a high degree of hygiene, I tend to have dirty hands. So I don't like to touch my food directly in the field. And I'm going to mirror that action here at home. All right. I can see dry parts. Maybe I'll use my phone to get a shot of that and then kind of overlay it. Right, so we got it in the 1600 milliliter and 800 milliliter pot combination. So the chemistry of the yeast respiration is something that's fascinating and should be known by everybody. Krebs cycle, citric acid cycle, respiration, whatever you want to call it. But when the yeast respirates, just like us, it takes in oxygen and releases carbon dioxide. Now, when it metabolizes the sugar, however, and this is the foundation of most of society, it creates alcohol. When it does it inside of flour, that carbon dioxide and that slight bit of alcohol is what makes bread. So yeast is literally the foundation of society. All right, I'm just going to leave that down there as it is. I'm not going to mess with it too much. Can't get it perfect because it's such a small volume anyways. This one I'm going to cook with the ever new titanium. I'm going to fill it past its 60 milliliter point. And then this one, this is another reason why I'm making two batches. I'm going to take a little inspiration from Wisconsin Eric, one of my longest time and most loyal subscribers, not subscribers, heathens. I appreciate your viewing, and I also appreciate your input. I'm going to use the Trangia style from Espit with the variable snuffer to get some more prolonged cooking, and I'm going to use it to create standoff. I am going to use it in combination with the Coleman camp stove as such. It should spread the flame pretty good, should get the water boiling. So we'll see where we end up from here. When I come back on the next bit, we'll be fired up. So again, I've deliberately filled these camp stoves up with denatured alcohol to a point where they would not be considered overfilled, but they are just on the precipice of spilling. So in fact, this one is starting to come out of the ports, and the Trangia style, I mean, you can fill it up almost all the way, but I don't want to fill it up too much because I want to keep it from overboiling, because if it gets too hot and transfers too much heat to gasify the alcohol, it will pop and overboil, spill out, and create fire. Not so bad in the wild if you're in a dry area, bad when you're in a basement with a wooden table with a veneer on it. So you can see I lit that one from the outside because of the residue of the alcohol coming off. And I'm going to let them heat up just a little bit more. The Trangia is about to bloom. The Avenue is in bloom. We're going to have this so we can have it 3/4 open to half open. And we're going to start it at 3/4. Yeah, when Wisconsin Eric was talking about stewing up those Brandywine tomatoes to make a sauce in the field, I thought that's the fantastic thing about the Trangia being variable like that. You can actually do some more complex cooking aside from just boiling, add water, add ingredients. And for weight, I'm going to use this, which I'll showcase in a later video. All right, so we're off to a start, and we'll see where it goes from there. Generally, when I cook bread in the oven, if I'm going high heat, like 400 degrees, depending on the size and thickness of the bread, let's say for like a French bread style or even a pizza style, I will go high heat because the bread is thinner and I need it to cook more thoroughly, more rapidly, without burning your sauces or your cheese or your toppings. Or again, if it's French style, I want that baguette to basically fluff up quickly, and once it leavens properly, or not leavens properly, but once it expands properly, its volume is, more cylindrical, so its volume is decreased as opposed to, say, a loaf of bread. So when I cook a loaf of bread, I'll be down to anywhere from 160 or 360 degrees Fahrenheit, 350 degrees Fahrenheit. It'll take approximately 35 to 40 minutes to cook a loaf of bread like that. When you're talking about steaming and cooking on a camp stove, I've never done this before, so I don't know how long it'll take. Biscuits cooked in the oven generally take about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on how big they are. So biscuits cook up quick. This is more of a biscuit mix, but again, I'm steaming it. So generally, the temperature inside, as long as there's water, is not going to get above 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So we'll see how long this takes. So what I've decided, even though again I was inspired by the way the Evernew is just starting to boil, I need the heat to come up on this a little bit quicker. So what I've done is I've taken the snuffer variable cap off of the test-bit, and I want that Trangia to come up more to temperature. I might just let it burn full out, but if it gets to a point where I think I need to make it variable, I will use this. We're at the 15-minute mark now, and kind of as a disclaimer, this could turn out totally disastrous, not even work. At which point I'll just go back to frying them up in the skillet and making like a Navajo flatbread with some oil in there, or maybe some Shawnee Johnny cakes with some cornmeal. But I'm hoping for the best. Alright, right now, this steam that is coming out of the Keith Titanium, I can smell a burning of the bread, so I'm going to take it off. But that is no longer steam from water. Alright. See if we can't remove that from the edges. It's going to be interesting to see how this turned out. Woo! It's definitely moist. There's a significant amount of residue in here. I would imagine that was created by the steam. And at the 33-minute mark, my compulsion to check the inside here has overcome me. We have a golden brown color. Alright, we've come down enough in temperature here at the 35-minute mark. I'm going to open up this bread. And we'll take a taste. It's not bad. It definitely has a sponginess to it. I can attribute the browning to the baking soda. It almost has a pretzel taste from the amount of salt and baking soda that I added. Again, that's how you make pretzels, by the way. You'll boil a solution, quarter cup to a gallon of baking soda. So a quarter cup to 4 quarts of water, and you'll have a solution, and you get that to a boil, and then you'll dip your dough down inside of it and leave it there for about 20 to 30 seconds, and then take it out, form your pretzel, bake it, and that's how you make pretzel bread. So this is almost coming out like a pretzel bread. With butter, that would be fantastic. The sponginess of it, if you were to let it sit a little bit longer, it would tack up. But it is definitely moist on the inside, especially coming out fresh. I'm kind of impressed. This may not be the best method of baking bread in the field, but it is definitely a method that will work. I'm going to let that steam boil off. My pan is almost in contact there. We're just going to take that completely off the burner. Just under the 40-minute mark. Snuff it out. There's so little of residue of alcohol in there that the Trangia was all but burned out. So I could have probably let that go to complete exhaustion. Now again, I didn't measure how much water I put into the 1600 milliliter pot, but I would say I put probably 3/4 of a cup inside, maybe a little bit less, maybe 2/3 of a cup. And I'll take a picture of how much water is actually left in there, which is a very, very small amount compared to the initial amount. And we'll see where we ended up with this batch. Ooh. This actually looks to be more thoroughly cooked. This was thoroughly cooked, but this one looks to be a little bit more evenly cooked, I should say. Again, wider surface area, more water. What else would contribute to it? I don't know, maybe just a lot more steam from that water. I would say that it did not get up to the same amount of internal pressure as this, even with the weight on top of the skillet or lid. And if it came out half as good as that one, it's still going to be pretty good. Let's take a look. Again, because it had more water, the temperature didn't raise up as much because it was limited. So while it cooked thoroughly through, it did not get as browned on the inside. And just like any other recipe, I'll be able to refine it, be able to add to it, take away, determine proper levels of measurement for ingredients, and then proper levels of water for steam cooking, and also time. That's not bad at all. About the same level of thickness. Even though this one was significantly wider in circumference, it fluffed up to the same level of rise. I would say neither one is stiffer than the other. Very edible, very good. Again, you tend to appreciate food when you're on the trail and you're hungry, more so than you do in your kitchen. But if this was served in my kitchen to a guest at my house, they would appreciate it. If it was served in a restaurant, you'd say, wow, that's a unique take and a style on it. But as I've said before, if you were wandering on the trail for 3 days lost and you came across me and I cooked up this bread for you, you'd bring it up at holiday meals, telling people how it was probably the best thing you ever eaten. I'm glad I added that powdered butter to the mix. So shelf stable, there's no need to add butter to it in the field like real butter. Well, it is real butter or powdered butter I have. But you put your premix dry in the bag. You wake up in the morning when you go to brew up your coffee or your tea or whatever, add a little bit more water, siphon it off into this bread mix, massage it around, go about walking on the trail. By about noon, it'll have puffed up and risen. Give it a little bit of a knead, and then steam cook it in your pot. And then you'll be able to carb load for the rest of your trek. That'll go great with some trail bologna or some bacon. And another thing I forgot to mention, save your parchment paper. I mean, your pan's going to be easy enough to clean out. You know, it's not too difficult. A little bit of water in here. I mean, just mechanical scraping. If you carry some kind of abrasive sponge with you, it wouldn't take anything to clean that out. But you could actually reuse this parchment paper 3, even 4 times. Especially now that you got it properly sized. Waste not, want not.